Why is Formula 1 scrapping wind tunnels by 2030? Before we get into things, let's have a quick look at why wind tunnels are used in F1. They simulate cars travelling at race speeds and can analyse individual aero parts which account for a large percentage of an F1 car's performance. Teams will have an inversely proportional amount of wind tunnel time compared to their previous year's constructor standing. So Mercedes will have the least and Haas will have the most time in the wind tunnel this season. This is done to close the gap between teams as well as the introduction of the cost cap. With the improvement of computational fluid dynamics, or CFD for short, this is basically a wind tunnel simulated on a supercomputer. Is there still a need for old school wind tunnels in this day and age, and why are F1 looking to get rid of wind tunnels for good? Are these CFD simulations just as good as old school wind tunnels? F1's own engineers focused on CFD simulations when helping to define the 2022 rules package for the new aero cars. Teams, when developing their 2022 cars, or any car for that matter, will do a lot of aero testing on the computer, as it is much cheaper, quicker and environmentally friendly than building prototype parts. As the majority of F1 cars are made from lightweight carbon fibre, this composite material is not something that can be easily recycled. It is also easier to make minimal tweaks, such as increasing a front wing size by 10% on a computer rather than building a whole new prototype. Once teams have a good idea of the concept, they can produce real prototypes and test these parts on the car. Things to look out for when teams are testing aero in pre-season are flowers and aero rakes. An aero rake is comprised of keel probes that register the flow of air over each data point. Each probe measures the air, which then fed back to the teams and engineers live. The accuracy of each aero rake is approximately 10 microns, or about the size of one red blood cell. Flowers paint is used by doing a short run, which airflow around the car will cause the flowers to run over the aero parts. The flowers test will be used to collaborate data gathered in the CFD or the wind tunnel. It is a simple concept, but it is still used today by teams, and it seems to be very effective. So with wind tunnels and CFD simulations both being used, why are F1 getting rid of wind tunnels completely by 2030? This isn't a controversial opinion, as 8 out of the 10 teams have agreed with this in an F1 meeting last year. There are 2 reasons for this transition away from wind tunnels. The first and probably most important reason why wind tunnels are looking to be scrapped is their environmental impact. I think this is very unknown, but wind tunnels require a massive amount of energy. That's why the plan is aligned with F1's stated date of 2030 for making the sport carbon neutral. Although you may never thought about it, wind tunnels consume vast amounts of electricity. One estimate puts a team's typical bill at over £1 million of energy per year. Multiply that by the 10 F1 teams and you can see why the sports bosses are keen to scrap this. Not only is it a lot of money, it has a huge environmental impact. So as just mentioned, the other problem with wind tunnels is the cost. With the cost cap coming in this year, the aim of this new cost cap is to deliver a more competitive championship and to promote a level playing field and ensure the long-term financial stability and sustainability of Formula 1's 10 F1 teams. Those who do not have their own tunnels and instead rent time elsewhere typically pay around £25,000 per day. This adds up across a season. Although computer modelling is still expensive, it is a fraction of this cost. Imagine how much Mercedes have spent compared to Haas and why it's a no-brainer why their car was so much better than the Haas in previous eras without this cost gap. So with wind tunnels set to be phased out by 2030, could there be any problems with this? I think it's going to be much harder to monitor teams' CFD time. CFD time is currently limited just as time in the wind tunnel is, but surely it'll be easier for teams to run more simulations, maybe somewhere else or in a different company, than it would be to ship their car to another wind tunnel in a different country to get these tests done. F1 teams have a history of breaking the rules before performance games, especially with the amount of pressure these teams are under. Another problem is models are obviously never going to be as good as the real thing, but they can probably give teams a very accurate representation of what is happening with their cars, and if everyone is in the same situation, I think it's going to be a fair playing field. So do I think scrapping wind tunnels by 2030 is a good idea? As an F1 fan, I can probably say that this has not crossed the mind of 99% of people who watch the sport. But with teams like Aston Martin and McLaren building new wind tunnels this year, they still believe there are benefits that can be made in this day over computer simulations. With F1's push for sustainability and to be carbon neutral by 2030, I think this is a clear method where they can reduce the environmental impact whilst minimising the impact on development of F1 cars, to keep this sport as competitive as possible. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, thanks for watching, see you next time.